Using rigged characters is the next step up from basic animations. In this video, we'll learn how to use a rigged character with animations that can be used inside of BabylonJS. We'll use animations from Mixamo, then combine them together to be used inside of Blender. So let's get started. Okay, so we're going to start off by looking at a character package from Kenney. This is the animated characters 2. It includes a rigged model, and we also have 4 different skins with this model. It also includes 3 animations, but we're not going to be using those animations. I did run into some issues trying to test them out with the rigged character inside of Blender. So instead, we'll use this as an opportunity to use the same rigged character with animations from Mixamo. I'll still be using the same type of animations, idle, jump, and running, but these are going to come from Mixamo instead. Now, I do recommend downloading this yourself so you understand the process of using this rigged character inside of Mixamo. I will be providing the final asset in the code repository, but you can download this for free off Kenney as well. And once you do that, you can then jump into Mixamo.com. Okay, so here we are at Mixamo.com. This is a website where we can download all sorts of different kinds of animations. You can see they have quite a bit. Now you will need a free account in order to actually download any animation clips from here. Or if you also want to test this out with your own custom model, you can upload a character. Again, that requires a free account. Now, this character comes from the Animated Characters 2 package. If you want to upload this yourself, in this window, click on Upload Character. Select Character File. And then you can navigate to wherever you save the Animated Characters 2. Go into the model, and there is the character. Okay, so we're going to start off by first looking at the animations. If you don't see this view here, click on Animations at the very top. Then in the search bar, let's start off with our first animation. This will be idle. So type in idle, then hit enter. Now you can pick whatever animations you want for this. I'm going to try to stick to the same animations that are in the Animated Characters 2. So I'm going to pick, let's go with this one right here. Now we can see a preview of how this animation works with our current rigged character. And you can also modify things like the character arm space. If they're a little bit too close to the body, you can increase this all the way up to say 60. Okay, so I think that looks a little bit better. And I'm pretty happy with how this animation looks on this character. So now I want to download this. Now note the format is FBX binary, and we also have frames per second below that, which is currently set to 30. Let's bump that up to 60. The keyframe reduction will leave at none. And in this case, for this skin, the skin refers to the mesh that we see here. You can also download this without skin, which will just download the rigged portion of this character with the animation data. Typically, I would go with without skin since we already have our character, but I found that downloading these with skin from Mixamo actually results in a better quality and more accurate representation of that same animation clip. So you may have some wonkiness with the without skin option, so I recommend going with skin. Click download, and I'm going to download this to a folder on my desktop called animations. Okay, so there is the animations folder, and we're going to name it idle as well. Okay, let's repeat this process. Let's look for a second animation, which is jump. Okay, I think this one looks pretty good. And be aware whenever you're working with these types of animations, just make sure that it's not clipping through the ground. Okay, so I think this looks pretty good with this character. I'm not going to be modifying anything in regards to its settings. Once again, we'll download this. FBX binary, 60 frames per second, none for the keyframe reduction, and with skin. Let's go back to the search bar once again. This time we'll type in running. And I don't want it to be quite this fast, maybe something in between, kind of like a short jog, if you will. Maybe something like this will be fine. Okay, so I think this looks pretty good. It's not too fast and not too slow. So it's kind of a mix between running and walking, which is what I want with this character. Now, do note with animations like this, where you have the character physically moving with the animation, it can be a bit more difficult to utilize this unless you're using this for some sort of background animation. But if you're using this for a character controller of sorts, I would recommend having this in place. So by making this in place, you can loop this over and over. If I was using the WASD keys on my keyboard to move forward or back, I can just have this animation looping, and then I can control the position of this character through code. So the animations, whenever possible, I always like to keep those as visual elements, not as actual elements to control the physical position or rotation of that character. Okay, so I'm happy with this result here. We'll download this one as well. Again, with skin, 60 FPS, binary for the FBX format, and then none for the keyframe reduction. Okay, so we're done with the animations that we need from Mixamo. You can download additional animation clips. The process that we're going to be going over is going to be useful for either one or many animations for a rigged character. So I'm done with Mixamo. Let's jump into Blender now. Okay, so we're going to be using Blender version 3.0.1, which is the latest version as of this video. Let's delete the original cube. So select it and then press X and then delete. It's going to import the model of the rigged character. And I'm going to grab this from the package that we downloaded. So FBX is the file type. Go to animated characters 2, model once again, character medium. Okay, so this is the character with the rig. Let's apply a skin to this character. If you navigate to the top corner of this window, you should see a crosshair appear. Left click and drag to the left whenever you see that. At the very top of this window, switch this to the shader editor. Click on the mesh of the character. You should see the material nodes over here. We're not using a normal map, so we can delete this altogether. And within here, press Shift A, search, and let's look for an image texture. The image texture is going to be used for the texture that we're going to use as a skin. Connect the color to the base color, click on Open, and let's navigate once again to the animated characters 2. Go into the skins folder this time. Now you can pick whatever skin you want in here. I'm going to pick the Cyborg Female A. Now, if you take a look at the very top toolbar here and you use your scroll wheel, you'll get to this option down at the very end. This is allowing us to view the textures. If you click on the material preview here, you should be able to see something. But in this case, we can see that our character is fully black. And the main reason that happens is because the alpha value is set all the way down to 0. Bump this all the way up to 1. And also note that the emission is also set to pure white. Whenever you have an emission other than black, it is going to cause issues. You're going to see that color up here. In Blender, it doesn't actually appear in that case, and it can be a bit deceptive. But once you actually use this in BabylonJS, you may see that your character looks pure white, and this is why. So let's bring this back down to black. Okay, and I think I'm happy with everything else in here. Maybe bump up the roughness a bit all the way up to 1, just so the character doesn't look like he's shiny. But everything else is good as is. Let's repeat this process for closing this window now. Left click at the very top corner of this window and drag to the right. Okay, now let's take a look at importing the animations that we got from Mixamo. We'll do this one by one. So let's go to File, Import, again, FBX. Let's navigate to where we saved the Mixamo animations this time. And we'll start off with idle. I'm also going to switch into the animation workspace. This just makes it easier to take a look at everything in our scene and play our animations. Over on the left, we see a preview of what the camera is looking at, and this is our working window. Once again, just like before, if you want to see the materials in here, click on the material preview. Same thing on this side. Use your scroll wheel if you don't see the material preview. And I'm using Shift and the middle mouse button to navigate around in this window. Now remember, with this character, we exported this out with skin. So we're going to see a duplicate of our character in regards to the mesh. We also see the rig associated with that character. Now, we're not going to be using this duplicate cloned version of this character. Instead, all I want to do is rename the animation. So the animation that we imported from Mixamo is currently attached to this rig. I want to rename that and then use it with our current character. Right now, we have the dope sheet opened up, and the dope sheet allows us to see all the keyframes associated with an animation in here. So all of these are keyframes. You can use your scroll wheel to scroll in. So each one of these dots represents a keyframe. You can also hold down the middle mouse button to move left and right. And if you want to play the animation, go to frame 0. So you can left click and drag to 0, then press the space bar, and you can see the animation is playing on the character that we just imported. You can press space bar once again, and it'll pause the animation. You can also do the same thing down here with these icons. Okay, let's take a look at the actual animation clip that we imported. There are a few ways of finding this. If you take a look in the hierarchy, the root is the character that has a texture, whereas the root.001 is the one that we just imported. If you open that up, go into animation, there is the animation clip. We can also find this if you switch over here where it says dope sheet, select the action editor. So here we have the name of the animation, and as you can see here, it doesn't really tell us what this animation is. And we're going to have the exact same name for the animation every time we import an animation that comes from Mixamo. So that's why we're doing this one by one. And we're going to rename this first to idle. And you can see it changed over here as well. After you rename this, you can then delete the root.001. So right click on it and then click on delete. Now, if you select your current character, click on the rig. So click at the very top here. That is the rig. And you open this up once again. You'll see that we still have the animation of idle in here. Left click on it. And now you can see that the animation is being played on the character. So I'll use the space bar to play it. Okay, so now we know this works with our character. Let's repeat this process a couple more times for the other animation clips. And we'll go a little bit faster with these as we're just renaming the actions. So file import, FBX. This time we'll go with jumping. Again, we can rename the animation clip either from here or over here and note the name of this. So I'll rename this to jump. So now we have idle and jump. Let's delete the root.001. And once again, we'll do this for the last animation. Okay, let's just verify that all of these animations will work just fine on this character. There is the jump. And then finally the run. Now, if you want to see how well these loop, what you can do is use the settings down below here. You can see we're starting off at frame 1, and this ends at frame 250. For the running animation, this will be good for looping. So let's go to the very end frame here, and it looks like that is frame 50. So I can set the end frame here to 50 as well. And if you left click on the clock icon, this will allow you to loop this over and over again. So let's go to the very beginning here, and I'll use my space bar, and you can see it loops perfectly. Okay, so now we have everything set up with the animations. Let's take a look at using this with the NLA. If you go back to the top left of this window, open this up, and you'll see non-linear animation. We're going to be using this to essentially group together the different animations we can use with this character. That will appear as animation groups inside of BabylonJS. So let's go into the NLA. And by default, you'll see that it has the current animation that we were previewing a moment ago. We need to add all the animations as an action strip. So click on Add Action Strip, and make sure that you have root selected. So we'll add idle first. And you can see in this case, even though I do actually have root selected, it says I need to actually click on that track. So I'll click on it. You can see I don't really get any kind of notification letting me know that I do have it selected. But if you do run into that issue, just left click on that track and then try it again. There we go. And note, wherever this is at, that's where that action strip is going to appear in the NLA. So make sure that this always starts off either at 1 or at 0. So I'm just going to start off at 1. And you want to rename these tracks in here to whatever the name of the animation is. So this name right here is going to appear in BabylonJS when we reference the animation groups. Let's repeat this process for the other animations. So jump. And then finally we have run. Okay, once again, make sure that you rename these as well. Okay, so run, jump, and then idle. Now, if you want to preview these, you'll see that if I press the space bar, it's going to play the first animation at the very top. If you just want to play these individually, let's say I want to play just the jump, you can left click on the star icon, go back to the very beginning here and press the space bar, and you can play that alone. And note, again, this is looping based off frame 1 and 50, so it cuts off very abruptly. Just keep that in mind. You can bump this back up to 250. And there we go. Okay, so we're done with the animations. We have everything grouped together how we like. You can see all of these are enabled. We have run, jump, and idle. Now let's export this out as a GLB file. Then we'll take a look at using this in BabylonJS. I'll switch back to the layout. Let's go to File, Export, and we're going to export this out as a GLB. I'll save this in the same folder as before with the Mixamo animations. Let's open these up a bit. So I'm not selecting anything in here. We can leave that as is. We're going to leave pretty much everything as is. So Y up should be enabled. For the geometry, all of this is fine. I may want to enable compression. And then finally, for the animation, all of these should be checked on by default. So this will allow us to actually export out the animations. Let's just give this a relevant name. I'll call this character. And we'll export this out. Now, before we take a look at anything in the code, let's first make sure that this actually works with BabylonJS. A very quick and easy way to determine whether or not these files are going to work inside of our Babylon project is to test them out within the Sandbox. So we can use a GLB file in here. I'm going to import this. So I'm going to select my character, the one that we just exported out from Blender. And you can see everything works as intended. So I can see the textures, and you can see that we are playing the idle animation. I can pause this as well and scrub through it. You can see it's playing just fine. I can also open this up, and you can see that I also have jump and run in here. There's jump. And then finally, there is run. And you can see by default, it automatically loops this. It's playing it over and over. So this works just fine. Okay, so now we can start taking a look at actually coding this in BabylonJS. Okay, so here we are in Visual Studio Code. I'm using a class called Character Animations. This starting class is very simple. All we have are some basic stuff for the scene. We have an environment texture, we have a camera, and we also have the background model, which is the prototype level.glb. We'll be using that as our mesh environment. Now we need to take a look at importing the character. So let's make sure that we include that in our models folder. So here is my character that I exported out from Blender. We'll drag that into the models folder. All right, going back to our character animations class. What I'm going to do here is I'm going to copy the create environment. The process for importing this is going to be nearly identical. We're going to rename this to create character, and we'll change the GLB file here to character as well. So character.glb. And I want to make sure that I grab a couple of things from this. So I want to grab the meshes from before, but I also want to grab something called an animation group. So it's animation groups. And we're using destructuring to grab the animation groups and the meshes. The meshes we've used before, so we can use the meshes to maybe reposition this or place it somewhere else. Or if you need to create a reference to the individual model, you can do that as well. So let's take a look at what we have just from the start. We need to make sure that we call this up above. So we'll call this in the constructor, this.createCharacter. All right, let's take a look at this in the browser. Okay, so if we take a look at our character, you can see that they are pointing in the opposite direction. It's not really a big deal for a character like this because typically this would be used for a character controller and they may be moving in multiple directions. But we can rotate this inside of Babylon ourselves. If you try to rotate this in Blender, you may have some issues with the animations or the rig, so I don't recommend doing that. You can easily do this inside of BabylonJS, so it's not really that big of an issue. Now you will notice that the first animation is playing. The first animation happens to be the idle animation, but by default this will play automatically whenever Babylon detects an animation on a rigged character. If you don't like that effect, you can stop the animation right after you import it, and then you can play any other animation as well. So let's take a look at how we can rotate this character around, how we can stop the animation it's currently playing, and how we can play the other animations as well. Going back into the create character method, let's first take a look at rotating the character. So meshes is available to us here. We can use that to rotate the character. So meshes 0.rotate, And with rotate, we provide an axis that we want to rotate along. This is going to be the y-axis, which is vector3.up. Okay, so vector3.up is a shorthand way of writing out the y-axis of up. So that's a +1. Next, we need to provide a number. And note, this is the amount in radians. In this case, that's going to be pi, or 3.14. You can also write out math.pi. And we're going to rotate him 180 degrees. So math.pi will be 180 degrees in this case. If you want to stop the first animation from playing, you can say animation groups. And animation groups is an array. What you can do here is you can also console log the animation groups. So animation groups, I'll say animation groups. That way we can see what we get with the animation groups. But I know this is an array, and the first element in there is going to be 0, and I can just say dot stop, just like that. This will stop the first animation from playing. We'll be able to see all the other animation groups in the console. Go and save this. We'll take a look at this in the browser. Okay, taking a look at our scene, we can see that our character has stopped. It looks like they were midway through the animation. They are facing the correct way. And if we take a look at the console, we can see the animation groups, and we have 3. So we have idle, jump, and run. So here we can see that the first one is idle. That just happens to be coincidentally the first animation that we want to play. So idle is typically going to be our standard animation that we want to play for a character. And then jump and run are the ones that are event-based. Let's take a look at how we can play the other animation clips in here and how we can loop them. Going back into the create character method, we stop the original idle animation. What we can do here is we can do the same thing for playing animations. So we know that the second and the third element is going to be the jump and the run. So let's test this out with animation groups 1. And all we have to do is say dot play. And you can see we have an optional parameter in here called loop. So I could say true if I want this to loop over and over again. We're going to save this and we'll take a look at this once again. Okay, so this is the second animation. You can see this is a jumping animation. For something like this, you would not want it to loop over and over. Maybe this is based off a button input, but you can see how that's working. Now we can test this out with the run animation as well, and then we'll be done with the animation groups. Okay, we'll swap this out with 2. Let's give this a try once again. And you can see our character is going out for a jog. Once again, this is in place. So we can play this over and over again as we're running. If I press the WASD keys to start moving forward, I can then play this animation, have it looping, and then I can control the position of this character. Okay, so there you have it. That's how you use animation groups and rigged animations inside of BabylonJS.